Looking back on my last video, it felt like I was bombarding you with a whole bunch of information without giving you a lot of time to grasp any of it. Well, that is pretty much how it was for me when I first entered the hospital. They sent me to a million different rooms where I felt like I met 50 people trying to explain to me what's wrong with my body. Something that I would like to drink often, like maybe 2 times a day, was a large cup of French vanilla. Looking at the numbers now, I actually couldn't do anything besides laugh, because these are some of the most disgusting numbers I've ever seen in my life. 71 grams of carbs and 55 grams of sugar for a large cup, which is what I was having 1 to 2 times a day for over a year. You could definitely say I was addicted to it. Now, I know that habits are very hard to break. The situation scared me so bad that day I left the hospital, I cut literally all ties with sugar and carbs. I honestly surprised myself with how fast I was adapted to it, but I figured the fear played a large role in that. To sum up a small amount of what I covered in the first video, I'll do a little review. There are 2 types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. I'm type 1. To have your blood sugar levels in a stable range, your sugar levels should be between 4.8 and 7.8ish before a meal and 7 and 10 2 to 3 hours after a meal. There's an infinite amount of reasons why your sugar levels change. We talked about hypoglycemia, which is like the opposite of diabetes, where there's not enough sugar in the body. And I spoke about exercise on a regular basis to help enhance insulin action and thus lower the amount of insulin required. If you want to hear my story about how I found out about my diabetes and how I'm managing it, please take a look at the previous video, link in the description. In this video, I'm going to show off more VR games I found which has been helping me out, as well as continuing my story that I forgot to explain in the last video, as well as explain some new topics that I learned recently. For this video, I'm going to be looking at these games. So, what info did I miss out on last time? Now, I have no idea how I forgot about this because it was the reason I had to drop out of school that semester, but a bit after I left the hospital, my eyesight had worsened. To be more clear, my eyes were fine when I came out of the hospital, but a few days later, it had gotten extremely worse. Now, I already wear glasses for being farsighted, but now it felt like all the words that I read were a blurry mess. This is actually common for those who have not been able to manage their blood sugar. If your blood sugar is high for too long, it causes a problem with the eyes by causing damage to the blood vessels of the retina and will heal when the blood sugar goes back to a stable range for a few weeks. So we know diabetes is bad, but what could happen from having really high blood sugar levels? I'm surprised I didn't mention this in the first video, but as mentioned before, we have the damage to the blood vessels of the retina, which can, of course, lead to blindness. There's cardiovascular disease, there's nerve damage, kidney damage, skin problems, and a couple others. About 2/3 of the people with diabetes actually die from cardiovascular conditions like heart attacks or strokes. Going back to the topic of my eyesight, it did go back to normal after about more than a month, but I had to drop out of school for the semester due to not being able to read anything. I was trying with a magnifying glass and one of those fancy hats with a little magnifying glass attached to it in the front, but it was still hard to see and it just made me feel more discouraged and frustrated. Another problem I had was something called ketoacidosis. Diabetic ketoacidosis is a life-threatening problem that affects people with diabetes. It occurs when the body starts breaking down fat at a really fast rate. The liver processes the fat into a fuel called ketones, which causes the blood to become acidic. It wasn't very serious for me as the insulin that the nurses were giving me seemed to have helped, but they were constantly checking on me to see if it had gotten worse. Thankfully, it didn't. Self-criticism is something that I feel plays a huge role with diabetes. You're encouraged constantly to check your sugar levels so that you can properly manage how much insulin you need to take, as well as seeing how the amount you took affects you. When you constantly have to check it and see these horrible numbers that you didn't expect, you begin to feel like you did something wrong. You start to panic and get this feeling of uneasiness that won't go away until you get it back to a stable range. You start to question yourself. Did I not take enough insulin? Did I take too much insulin? I had the same meal with the same amount of insulin, but my numbers are too high now. I don't know what I did wrong. What went wrong? What did I do wrong? Why is it high? Why can't I stop shaking after I ate? How much insulin am I supposed to take? Self-criticism isn't something that can change easily. The doctors monitor your sugar levels and tell you where you need to improve constantly. So when you try to improve and you see bad results, it's the most discouraging thing that can happen. It honestly feels like no matter what you do, it'll still end up disaster. Very recently, I got a call from my nutritionist and she discussed carb counting and carb ratio. I'm gonna keep it simple and not talk about simple versus complex carbs for now. But to put it simply, it's when you calculate how many units of insulin is good for a certain amount of carbs. So let's say I have 2 slices of toast, which is 30 grams of carbs. I take 4 units of insulin and see that my sugar levels stayed in a stable range after 2 to 3 hours. So now I know that 4 units of insulin can cover 30 grams of carbs. So I can now apply this information to other foods I eat by seeing how many grams of carbs 1 unit can cover. Something that really makes me, and probably other diabetics, upset is when people like friends or family think they know what we can or can't eat. I have a device that checks my sugar constantly and I'm told by my doctor to check at least 12 times a day. I know how many carbs or grams of sugar will start to spike my levels, so when I'm told stuff like, oh, it's gluten-free, but it's whole wheat pasta, why would I look at carbs? It's sugar that's bad for you, right? It only has like 20 grams of carbs, so like you could have 1 piece. Whoa, I thought you weren't supposed to eat all that stuff. When I hear all that, it really upsets me. I understand that they want to be helpful and are trying their best to understand the million concepts that comes with diabetes. But the truth is, nobody understands my body more than I do. The doctors are not magicians that can tell you the exact amount of insulin you need to take for a certain amount of carbs. They're constantly telling you that you need to test out everything you eat and adjust it naturally. It's up to you to figure out how much insulin you need to take for how many carbs. So when I'm already trying to figure all this out and I know what certain amount of carbs does to me, it makes me angry when people just casually say, oh, but it's not that high, it only has a little bit of carbs, because they don't know what any amount of carbs or sugar can do to me. A few months ago, my nurse gave me a call and recommended a new type of sensor which I can stick on my abdomen from Dexcom. She said it wasn't covered by my health insurance though, so after looking at the price, it just wasn't worth it. Even if it did constantly send data of my blood sugar to my phone, which is different from my Freestyle Libre, which only sends data when I put my phone over it. To make it even worse, each one lasts only 10 days instead of the 14 I currently have. But it's nice to know that they are inventing new and more helpful tools for diabetics to use. Now, before I get into the VR stuff, I want to talk about something that I recently found out about on the Beat Saber mod Discord. It's something called Night Scout. It apparently has the ability to show you your current sugar levels on different types of media, including VR, with a simple plugin. Obviously, I had to find out how it worked, so I went over to their website and checked out how to set it up. So I went and made a site for my personal use and I got the plugin ready and just needed to pair it up with my Freestyle Libre that I use. It only works with a sensor that can continually send data like the Dexcom sensor, so I guess I don't need this anymore. I'm just kidding. If you do have the right tools, I could definitely see this as something that could help keep your sugar monitored while you exercise or go about doing your daily activities. So if you are interested, give it a shot as it could work with many different types of devices. Now, it does work with the Libre I have, but from what I understood, it needs to be continuously monitored, so I'd have to literally strap my phone to my arm, which is not something I want to do. Now, let's get into the games. Let's start with the game that completely caught me by surprise. It's called Until You Fall. This is a roguelike action game where you have a weapon in each hand and must defeat the enemies in one room to advance to the other. To do this, you have to hold your sword in certain spots to block their attacks and then hit them when their guard is down. You ever play Hades? It's kind of similar. You get to choose one of 3 power-ups after each room to make you stronger. After you lose all your lives, you go back to the hub where you can spend the points you get from fighting to upgrade your weapons, rinse and repeat. This is a game where you have to use the analog stick to move or dash around. As soon as I heard this, I was bummed out as I had to stop playing games like Boneworks because of the motion sickness. I heard they added something called vignetting, which apparently helps with that, so I decided to give it a shot, and I was able to play for over an hour at a time with no problems, which is pretty cool. The gameplay feels way too good to stop playing, and the roguelike aspect will make each playthrough mostly different. This just came out of early access recently, so I can't wait to see how these guys continue to update the game. Power Beats VR. Well, this game is completely ridiculous. I bought this game because I saw it can auto-generate maps from any song you have on your PC. This was definitely one of the most active games I've played. Yes, it's another rhythm game. You got normal balls which you can punch, or the steel balls which you have to hit hard to break. You have lines that you have to follow, you have tunnels to duck through, you have walls to look out for, spikes to avoid, you have balls with patterns which have to be hit in certain directions. You're constantly moving, and it definitely wears you out after only a few songs, which I thought was awesome. There's a bunch of customization options, but the main reason you'll be opening this up again and again is because you can use any song you want. Now, like pretty much 99.9% of all auto-generated maps, it may or may not match with your song, but it does a pretty good job, and I still had a lot of fun punching and dodging, so I'm not going to complain about that. I got this one pretty recently, so I'm sure I'm missing some other info. Lastly, I want to show the new campaign mode in Pistol Whip, which has new playstyles and gets you moving more than ever before. I love the level where you have no bullets and can only dodge and hit them with your pistol. They introduce new levels, each with their own track and gimmick. I may have spoken quite negative near the beginning of this video, but although what I said is true, there are also some things that I felt were beneficial from all this, like eating healthier, doing more exercise, and getting me to start breaking out of my extremely tiny bubble and trying new things rather than sticking to my old routine. All this experience has taught me how badly I was living before and can help me pave a way for a better, healthier lifestyle. Once again, I want to thank you all for watching this video. I feel like there may still be topics I haven't covered yet, so I'll leave that for another video. But for now, I want to hear your stories, so please leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching. Love you all.